In a previous tutorial, I introduced you to the Heartstrings granny square. As you remember, each little heart and circle are actually mini motifs that you crochet continuously within the square. But many of you have asked me, how do you join the squares together? The answer is that there's actually a few different ways to join the squares. For this video, I will be showing you the first arrangement that comes to mind, where we will be connecting the bumps of the hearts together so that they end up looking like this. But since this arrangement leaves a big hole at the intersection, I'm also going to show you how to fill that hole in with a chain stitch square. Again, this is just one arrangement, and the good news is that no matter which way we join the squares, it's always possible to use my breakaway crochet techniques to crochet these squares one after the other without breaking the yarn between each one. The secret for working these squares continuously is knowing how to make floating rings. If you haven't tried my floating ring techniques before, please check out the resources I've listed within the description. Please subscribe to be notified of other videos as they become available. We're almost ready to start, but before we do, please be aware that the steps involved in making the squares itself are quite unusual. So if you haven't done so already, I suggest you practice making single squares first until you get a good understanding of the process involved. That's important because the main focus of this video will be more on how to join the squares and not so much on how to crochet them. You'll find the link for the detailed instructions in the description. Also be mindful of some minor differences between this tutorial and the single square one. For instance, I will be referring to each heart according to its orientation within the square. So in each square, there is a heart to the north, east, south, and the west. I will explain other special exceptions as they come to hand in the tutorial. So let's start now with the first row of squares. This first row is called the foundation row, and it's where we set up each square we want in the row. The first heart, again, we will make is the western heart, and in the single square tutorial, we actually started at the bump of that heart and worked kind of a quarter of a way around. But when we join the squares in this tutorial, we have a new starting point, which is here on this bump. So every time we start a new square, we will start with a bump here, worked only halfway, and then a full bump. So a quick reminder of how to start. We begin with a floating treble, which again is 2 yarn overs, yarn over, pinch, yarn over, pinch to make a floating ring. Pull through those 2 loops and a floating ring is made. Finish the treble using the loops on the hook by pulling through 2 loops 3 times. That is our floating treble, the first stitch of this western heart. Now we're only working a half bump, so we're going to do a double crochet next, chain and slip stitch, which gets us down into that crevice. And now let's work the second bump with the other chain, double crochet, and the 3 trebles all in the floating ring. So That's our 1.5 bumps worked on the western heart. Let's work some more on this square by doing the first connecting little circle, the central circle, finishing the western heart, starting the next connecting circle, start the north heart, start the next little circle, start the eastern heart, start the next little circle, start the southern heart and do the bumps on it, and finish off the next little circle. So now that we are at the point where we finish the eastern heart, let's work 1.5 bumps here. Start with 3 trebles, double crochet, chain 1, and slip stitch to finish the first bump, and the half bump is just another chain, double crochet, and 1 treble crochet. We've stopped at this point because we have come to the breakaway point, which means it's time to add the next square in our row. So for the next square in this foundation row, we started off the same way we did over here on this west heart. The only difference is when we get to the second bump, we need to join it to this bump here. So I'll go through how to do that now. So start with a floating treble. And notice that the first bumps there are already automatically joined. So that's already done for us. One less thing to worry about. Let's work the other half, or the rest of this half bump, with a double crochet, chain, and slip stitch into that new floating ring. Now let's just start the second bump with the chain, double crochet, and just the first treble, because this is now the joining point. Now the instructions say to count stitches just done, so all these stitches behind the hook, we go back 13 until we get to the stitch where we join. But really, I just usually eyeball it. Again, I'm going behind the hook and I'm pretty much finding that highest point of that bump and going in there. And again, I use my version of a slip stitch, which is to go into the stitch, pull everything to the left, and complete the slip stitch in that way. And we've joined those 2 bumps of the heart. So now just finish that second bump with 2 more treble stitches. Continue around this square just like for the first one, working some more on the western heart, starting the northern heart, starting the eastern, and starting the southern with its bumps. Finish the next little circle and end at 1.5 bumps. So now at this eastern breaking point, we can decide to add another heart in the row if we want to. And again, you just repeat what you've just done on this next heart here as you do this one here. But for this sample, I've shown you all I need to, and so I'm going to go ahead and start the return row. So for the return row, that means we do an about face and come back the other way and finish off these sections here. until we get back to the north heart and stop here because that is the next break point. Continue around, finishing the little circle, the bumps of the northern heart. Finish the next little circle, and on the western heart, finish it with 2 treble stitches and a slip stitch in the space between the 2 squares. Moving to the next heart on the next square, finish it with just 2 trebles. Finish the next little circle and end with 1.5 bumps. So now that the return row is finished, let's add another row of squares. And from now on, any additional row we add will be called a joining foundation row, which again is followed by a return row. But for now, we just need to worry about the first square in the next joining foundation row. You can see our break point happens here. So again, we work the same 1.5 bumps on this southern heart in this square this time instead of the west one. And just a reminder that this will be the first connecting circle in this square. It's in a different position from the other ones. The other ones were in the southwest. Just for these first squares in the joining rows, the first connecting little circle goes there. So start the next square with the half bump and the next half bump join to the heart below, and a couple more stitches on this southern heart. Continue around the southern heart working the little circles. Start the western heart, the northern heart. Start the eastern heart and end at 1.5 bumps. And now that we have come to the break point of the first square of the joining foundation row, again it's time to move to the next square. And again we start with 1.5 bumps, and likewise we join both bumps, but remembering since we're starting with a floating treble, this bump here and this one are already automatically joined. When we get to the first connecting little circle here, that's when we need to start thinking about the chain square that's going to connect the 4 little circles at the intersection. So when it's time to do the first little connecting circle for this 4th square here, just do the floating single crochet, and this time just work 2 single crochets. And this is now where we stop and look back behind the hook, and we've got these 3 little circles that we're going to join up. So if you just open up the work, they all just lined up for you, all in a row there. So to start connecting, do chain 4, come back, find that first little circle, count back 1, 2, 3 stitches, and slip stitch into that 3rd stitch. Again, it's called kind of going backwards, but that's my way of doing things. Connect the next one, so do 4 more chain. Again, we're coming back, finding the next little circle and slip stitching into that 3rd stitch. One more time. And that's that 3rd heart connected. Now let's get back to the beginning with chain 4 and finish our little square by slip stitching close to that partial little first circle we've done there. So just slip stitch around those chains there. And that's our square finished. Continue with the current little circle with 5 more single crochets. Close it up. And that's how that should look there. Continue around the western heart, adding the central circle. Begin the northern heart, begin the eastern heart, begin the southern heart, and join it to the first connecting circle. Working the bumps for the southern heart, start with 4 treble crochets and join to the heart below. Continue with the double crochet chain slip stitch, chain, double crochet, treble, and join to the next bump. Finish the southern heart and the next little circle and end at 1.5 bumps on the next heart. And at the breaking point of this next square, if we needed another square, now's the time to add it along that row, but we don't, so we come back around with our return row up to that north heart on the first square of the row. So this return row is just like the first one, starting with finishing the little circle and the bumps of the northern heart. Finish the next little circle and the next western heart, slip stitching between the 2 squares. Finish the eastern heart on the next square and the next little circle. On the north heart, end after 1.5 bumps. Since we're not adding another row to this sample, it's time to finish the western edge. So continue around the northern heart, finishing off the next little circle, add the bumps to the next western heart, and finish off the next little circle, and then the southern heart, continuing to the next square, and finishing off there. And that's our sample done. Just remember that you can always add as many squares in a row as you want and as many rows as you want, and lots of ideas. This is just a little doily or table setting I've made, but I'd really love to see what you come up with. Please share what you have done and stay tuned for future videos. Thanks for watching and see you again soon.